In this lecture, we will be discussing how we can implement sustainability with a process known as the natural step. As a quick review, we take a look at what we've learned about sustainability so far. First, the Brundtland Commission really provided the foundation for all of the sustainability initiatives that we now have globally. The Brundtland Commission offered the first widely used definition of sustainable development, and it highlighted that sustainability is a three-legged stool that only works if environment, society, and the economy are all considered together. We have also introduced the Millennium Development Goals and the Sustainable Development Goals, which have provided the overarching framework for international development work since 2000. One of the reasons why the MDGs and the SDGs have been successful is that these Millennium Development Goals and Sustainable Development Goals have well-defined objectives with measurable indicators. While the MDGs targeted poverty in developing countries, the SDGs are more comprehensive and apply to all countries. Also included on Canvas is a short video that discusses Manfred Max Newf's human scale development theory that identifies 9 basic human needs. And these 9 basic human needs are subsistence, protection, participation, leisure, affection, understanding, creation, identity, and freedom. The interesting thing about these human needs is that they're very stable, meaning that these needs are consistent across cultures and across time periods. What changes over time, however, is the way we satisfy these needs. To examine how we can best satisfy these needs, the video also introduces the concept of satisfiers, which are actions or conditions that satisfy human needs. Also mentioned are several special categories of satisfiers, like synergistic satisfiers that satisfy multiple needs at the same time. There are destroyers that addresses one need but deprives other needs, and pseudo-satisfiers that only superficially satisfy a human need. This framework can help us to critically examine how to best satisfy basic human needs and avoid wasting effort on superficial problem solving. For the final exam in this course, I would like you to know the 9 basic human needs and the different types of satisfiers, and you should be able to illustrate them with some examples. The goal of this video is to briefly review the alternative definition of sustainability that you heard about in the second animated video that was on Canvas. We will take this definition to derive 4 principles of sustainability, and after that, we will present the natural step approach for implementing sustainability in a very practical and personal way. So let's get started. The motivation for all of this is that the somewhat vague Brundtland definition of sustainability doesn't really offer a whole lot of guidance about how to actually become more sustainable. The Brundtland Commission definition was very good at creating international buy-in, but as we discussed previously, it wasn't very practical. When I'm in a grocery store, it's kind of difficult to relate my decision on what to buy or what not to buy to the Brundtland definition. How exactly do I make choices that do not affect the ability of future generations to meet their needs? And so this is where Karl Hendrik Robert is coming in. He simply thought that if we want the sustainability thing to actually work and be adopted by everyday people like you and me, we need to come up with something more tangible that people can actually work with. Now, because he is a medical doctor and researcher, he was naturally drawn to the approaching the issue with natural sciences. And the first step of his approach was to figure out the physical requirements for sustaining human life on Earth indefinitely. This led to the derivation of the rules of nature, which were the first main focus of the animated video that was on Canvas. What we will talk about here will make a lot more sense after you watch that video. So if you haven't watched it, maybe pause here and go back and watch the video from Canvas. Then what we're going to do now is quickly summarize the rules of nature. So these are the rules of nature introduced in that video. I listed the rules of nature that were mentioned in the video on the right, but I really like the illustration on the left much better because it highlights nicely the essence of these rules of nature and ties them back to topics that we talked about earlier in the course. Essentially, we know that the Earth is a closed system where all of the matter is contained within the system, but we receive energy from the sun. We also know that photosynthesis is the foundation for turning that energy from the sun into the diverse life that we see here on Earth. This is what the other videos that you looked at refer to when they talk about photosynthesis paying the bills. The other key point is that nature works in 2 efficient and well-balanced cycles where nothing is wasted. There is the slow geological cycle where we exchange matter with the lithosphere, and there's a much quicker biological cycle where new organic material is produced through photosynthesis and then used to build more complex structures or used as fuel for a wide range of biological activities. All of these system science facts should be familiar to you from the videos and from the beginning of term, but it's good to talk about these cycles again because they represent the fundamental constraints of the ecosystem within which we live. In other words, they are simply the rules of nature that we have to work within. Now, based on these rules, Karl Hendrik Robert came up with an alternative definition of sustainability. According to Robert, sustainability is about the ability of our own human society of continuing indefinitely within these natural cycles. Let's briefly look at this definition in more detail. The terms are human society, indefinitely, natural cycles, and let's contrast this to the definition of the Brundtland definition. Both definitions have a strong focus on humans and the idea of sustaining life far into the future. But this new definition has a much stronger emphasis on the environment as a foundation of all of our lives. It really highlights that society has to exist within the ecological constraints of the Earth. This was mentioned in the Stockholm Declaration and all the subsequent documents, but it was not explicitly included in the Brundtland definition of sustainable development. Robert's definition also highlights that sustainability is not actually a three-legged stool. Instead, it's a series of nested systems that need to work within the constraints of the system that they're embedded. So we have the environment as the foundation, and inside, embedded in the environment, is our society, and the society has to work within the boundaries of the environment. And then the economy is embedded in society, and the economy has to work within the boundaries and constraints of our society. This is obviously a much more useful way of looking at sustainability and the reality of the planet, rather than this idea of the three-legged stool. Now that we know how this nature works ideally, the next logical question is, how are our current practices interfering with the way nature works? And this brings us to the 4 root causes of unsustainable societies. First, we extract large amounts of material from the Earth's crust that are typically rare in the biosphere. This means that we are overwhelming the ability of the geological processes to absorb these materials back into the lithosphere. The second issue is that humans produce a lot of substances that accumulate in nature because neither the geological nor the biological cycles are able to cope with these substances that we've been producing. This can be natural substances like CO2, where we simply produce more CO2 than what is produced naturally by plants, or synthetic compounds that we produce like plastics that would normally not exist at all. So it is no surprise that the natural processes are unable to deal with the addition of these substances that humans produce. The third point is that we are not only overwhelming the natural ecological processes, but our destruction of the biosphere is also physically inhibiting nature's ability to run these ecological processes. So we are attacking the system, the ecological systems, from 2 sides. And last but not least, a lot of our current social and economic practices create barriers for people to meet their basic human needs, and they prevent us from becoming a just and equitable society. When you tie these root causes back to the idea of the 3 pillars of sustainability, you can see that we have challenges in all 3 pillars. So this is where we're at right now, and it's obviously not a great place to be. But the real issue is, how are we going to solve these challenges? Because we know we have to solve them. The simple answer is, just stop doing these things. And this brings us to the system conditions for a sustainable society. For a society to be sustainable, nature cannot be exposed to systematically increasing concentrations of substances from the Earth's crust or substances produced by humans. Nature also cannot be subjected to continuously increasing destruction. And finally, people cannot be exposed to conditions that systematically undermine their ability to meet their needs. It really is as simple as that. Now, it's necessary to realize that this doesn't mean that we cannot use plastics or fossil fuels anymore, but we cannot continue to overwhelm the natural processes dealing with these substances, and they cannot continue to accumulate in nature. So we need to find other ways to operate, either by producing less of these substances or finding ways to remove them from the environment again. It is also unrealistic to think that everybody's needs can be met all the time, but it should not get systematically harder for people to meet their needs. So when you compare these conditions with our current Western societies, it's pretty obvious that we do not fulfill these conditions. So the big question is, how do we become a sustainable society? This brings us to the guiding principles for becoming a sustainable society, which provides some simple rules that can help us move towards being a sustainable society. These rules state that we need to reduce and eventually eliminate our contributions to the systematic accumulation of materials from the Earth's crust. We need to eliminate the systematic accumulation of substances produced by society. We need to eliminate the ongoing physical degradation of nature, and we need to eliminate conditions that systematically undermine people's ability to meet their basic needs. These rules are really quite basic, but they are directly grounded in the rules of nature and the causes for our unsustainable societies that we just derived from them. So how does this all fit together? For becoming a sustainable society, the Brundtland definition defines the overall vision. This is where we want to end up. The guiding principles that we just derived describe the rules or constraints within which a sustainable society needs to operate. Now, it's necessary to realize that these rules are not prescriptive. So they don't tell you exactly to do this or to do that. They simply say that you need to operate within these boundaries. But within those boundaries, you can be creative as you want. This is very similar to the rules in sports. So on the right here, these are the markings of an ice hockey rink. The goal when playing hockey is to have fun and to make sure everybody else is having fun. So there are so few rules that guarantee things don't get out of control. But how you play the game within those rules, how you score that goal, that's completely up to the team. You can get as creative as you want, and how you play the game really depends on the skill and imagination of your team members. But as you're playing the game in these creative and imaginative ways, you're still staying within the rules. We could also use chess or any other game you think of to illustrate the concept of these guiding principles. But let's bring it back to sustainability. So the guiding principles describe what is needed to be a sustainable society. But how we want to achieve these goals is really up to us. And it really depends on our context and creativity. But as long as we follow these guiding principles, we eventually will become a more sustainable society. So let's look at some explicit examples of how we can put all of this into action in a company, a community, or in our personal lives. Now, just letting you loose with these guidelines and principles might not necessarily set you up for success. So to give you a little bit more guidance, the team of Carl Hendrik Robert has come up with the ABCD planning process that can help make meaningful progress towards sustainability. ABCD stands for awareness, baseline analysis, compelling vision, and down to action. For the rest of this lecture, I'm going to walk you through the different steps, and I'll illustrate the process with a number of examples. I'll also ask you occasionally to think about what you could do to be more sustainable. Let's start with A, which stands for awareness. Before you can get anything done about sustainability, you need to raise awareness that we have a problem. If people don't think there's a problem, they will not be very motivated to do anything about it. Now, given that you're in this class, it seems fair to assume that you have a general awareness about sustainability issues. So we're not going to spend too much time on this step in the process. But if you were the sustainability coordinator of a town or a company, you would want to develop this awareness among your citizens or staff first. Let's go to the baseline analysis then, which is what the letter B stands for. To make progressions in a meaningful way, we need to first understand where we are. So this is where we need to examine our current practices against the root causes of unsustainable societies. Are there actions that we are doing that are contributing to the extraction of materials from the Earth's crust or the production of substances that accumulate in nature? Are my actions contributing to the destruction of nature's ability to run the biological cycle? Are my choices creating barriers for people trying to meet their basic needs? So let's take a moment and think about our personal lives with respect to the root causes of unsustainable societies. Just reflect for a moment about where you're at and where the people in your lives are at with respect to this issue. Now, having followed step B and established a baseline, we have some idea of where we are at with respect to sustainability. So now we decide where we want to go. The system conditions for sustainability come in as a handy reference. The compelling vision describes where we want to be as individuals, communities, or companies so that we do not degrade the environment or prevent other people from meeting their needs. There are many companies and organizations that have used the natural step ABCD planning process to examine where they are with respect to sustainability and what they want to do about it. Examples include companies like Nike, IKEA, or the municipality of Whistler ahead of the 2010 Olympics. What is shown here is the compelling vision of the District of North Vancouver that they came up with when they went through this process in the early 2000s. So you can see they wanted their operations to become carbon neutral, zero waste, and non-toxic. They also wanted to create a healthy work environment, be fiscally responsible to protect their societal assets, and be leaders in the change and creating opportunities. You can see how the four of the necessary system conditions for sustainability all fit in here. The district wanted to reduce and eliminate the accumulation of materials from the Earth's crust and substances that are produced by society. They also want to reduce and eliminate their contribution to the degradation of the environment, and they want to be a leader in helping their staff and others fulfill their needs and dreams. This slide shows the compelling vision that Banff Springs Hotel in Banff, Alberta came up with. We won't go into the details here, but you can see that there are many similarities to the vision that the District of North Vancouver had, but also differences because the needs and abilities of a hotel are very different from what a municipal district can do. So it's necessary to realize that the compelling vision is going to be different for different people in different organizations. Let's say a few things about how to choose a meaningful, compelling vision. It's necessary to realize that your compelling vision does not have to solve all of your sustainability problems all at once. It just has to be a meaningful step in the right direction. So you want the step from the baseline analysis to the compelling vision, which is referred to as a sustainability gap. And you want this sustainability gap and the steps that you make along this gap, the steps to be big enough that they make a difference and promote innovation, but not too big a step that it becomes out of reach and people get discouraged. You also have to be honest in your baseline assessment, because if it's too optimistic, people will feel good about themselves and not be motivated to change anything. So you have to have the right tension between where you are in terms of your baseline analysis and where you want to go in terms of your compelling vision. Let's take a minute and think a bit about what your compelling vision might be for becoming more sustainable. So as I say, just take a moment and where we thought about where you are now, where the people in your life are at now, or maybe you're running a company and where it's at now. So what do you see as the compelling vision for where you would like to be in terms of sustainability as an individual? So now we've thought about our compelling vision of where we want to be, but how do we get there? So to come up with a meaningful plan, we actually go back to our baseline analysis to figure out meaningful steps towards the compelling vision. In the natural step framework, this process is called backcasting. What comes out of this process is D, which stands for down to action. So the idea is simply to brainstorm about any possible actions or initiatives that can get you towards your compelling vision. These actions can be small or they can be big, but they should be practical. Here are the possible actions that the staff of the District of North Vancouver came up with. You can see that it includes a wide range of ideas. Some can be implemented very easily, like organizing yoga and Pilates class for staff, while others take a lot more work, like retrofitting buildings or being a sustainable leader in North Vancouver. Okay, let's take another moment and think about 2 or 3 tangible steps that you could take towards the vision that you had for personal sustainability. So now that you have your list of possible actions, you can start prioritizing them according to how actionable these ideas actually are, whether they're broad enough to make a difference within the company or within your life or community, and whether they get you towards your sustainability vision or whether they create opportunity for future actions. All of these aspects can help you decide which of your actions you're actually going to implement and in what order. Once you've gone through the entire process of the natural step, you end up with a well-grounded and well-thought-out plan for becoming more sustainable. One last comment about the ABCD planning process is that once you've reached your compelling vision, you're still not done. You simply go through the process again to create a more ambitious, compelling vision and new actions that will help you get to this new, more ambitious, compelling vision. So it's an iterative process that continuously gets you closer and closer to where you need to be in order to be truly sustainable. Now, this planning process does not only work for sustainability, it also works well for planning your career goals, getting fitter, or anything else you hope to achieve. So it's a really good planning process in order to achieve goals in general. Let's wrap everything up. We started with the realization that the Brundtland definition for sustainable development is not really helpful for deciding how we can become more sustainable. It's a very useful overall vision, but it's not very practical for making decisions. We therefore took a different approach that started with identifying the fundamental rules of nature. These rules describe how the Earth system works, and any society that wants to be sustainable needs to function within the constraints given to us by nature. We then derived an alternative definition of sustainability, which states that sustainability is about the ability of our own human society to continue indefinitely within the natural cycles. Based on this definition, we derived 4 root causes of unsustainable societies and 4 system conditions for achieving sustainability. We then used the ABCD planning process of the natural step framework to develop meaningful and implementable steps towards becoming more sustainable. I hope this lecture has given you some very